Imagine trading Earth's bustling life for a quiet existence on a remote planet, where every creature, every shadow hides secrets. Liam Everhart, a seasoned colony engineer, knew HFY offered beauty, peace, and isolation, but he was about to find out it held something much more dangerous. Liam's life as a colony engineer on HFY was calm and predictable, a steady rhythm he'd come to appreciate despite occasional pangs of homesickness for Earth. Hestia was a vibrant, lush world, a planet painted in hues Earth could only dream of. Massive trees stretched toward the sky, their leaves shifting from gold to violet to deep green in the sun's rays. The atmosphere had a subtle lavender tinge during the day, intensifying into a rich crimson at sunset. And everywhere, the air pulsed with strange, alien life. Insects hummed with high-pitched clicks, and unfamiliar creatures called to each other from the dense foliage, creating an otherworldly chorus. After long days working on the colony's power systems, Liam found solace in solo hikes along the cliffs by the Galera River, a turbulent waterway slicing through the dense forests below. The colonists often warned each other about the river's fierce currents and the dangers of the cliffs, but Liam was drawn to their wild energy, to the freedom he felt away from the colony's confines. One evening, as the sun sank low, casting shadows over the forest, a sound made him stop cold. A distant, desperate roar rose from the river below. His heart quickened at the unmistakable thrashing of something trapped, fighting for its life. Driven by instinct, Liam dashed to the edge of the cliff, scanning the churning waters below. There, caught in a violent whirlpool, was a creature unlike any he'd seen. The creature was massive, at least twice the size of any predator back on Earth. Its body, elongated and sleek, resembled a leopard's, only fiercer, almost surreal in appearance. Iridescent fur gleamed as it caught the fading light, reflecting a dazzling spectrum of colors. Muscles rippled under its pelt as it struggled, powerful limbs clawing desperately at the water. Its tail lashed the current like a whip, and for one terrifying moment, its eyes, glowing a vibrant green, locked onto Liam's, wide with fear and defiance. Adrenaline surged through Liam. This wasn't just any creature, and he couldn't just stand by and watch it drown. Without a second thought, he dropped his pack and jacket to the ground, kicked off his boots, and took one final glance down at the river. The chances of survival weren't great, he knew, but the thought of letting this magnificent creature die without trying to help was unthinkable. He plunged from the cliff, the icy water hitting him with a force that knocked the breath from his lungs. The river's current was fiercer than he'd anticipated, dragging him downstream. Gritting his teeth, he fought against the pull, his muscles burning as he powered through, making his way toward the struggling creature just as it began to sink beneath the surface. Reaching it, Liam grabbed onto its fur, feeling the creature's immense strength as it thrashed, its claws raking the air. For a harrowing moment, they both teetered on the brink of being pulled under. But Liam held on, using every bit of strength he had to keep its head above water. One arm wrapped around its neck, he kicked toward the shore, determined to escape the whirlpool. The creature seemed to sense Liam's intentions. It stopped fighting him, its body sagging in exhaustion, breathing raggedly. Finally, after what felt like hours, Liam's feet touched the muddy bottom near the riverbank. With one final, draining effort, he dragged himself and the creature onto the shore, collapsing beside it in a heap. Liam lay still, gasping for air, his heart pounding in his ears. The creature lay beside him, its own chest heaving as it struggled to recover. For long moments, neither moved, each too spent to do anything but breathe. As Liam lay there, he gazed up at the alien sky, now a deep shade of purple as night began to fall. The creature's fur, still shimmering faintly, was soaked and matted, yet even in this state, it radiated a strange beauty. Liam had saved it, but now what? He knew nothing about this alien animal, nothing of its temperament or behavior. For all he knew, it might see him as a threat now that they were out of the water. But as he turned his head to look at it, he noticed something unexpected. Nestled within its fur, around its neck, was a dark metallic collar etched with glowing symbols that pulsed softly in the dim light. His heart skipped a beat. This wasn't a wild creature. It wore a collar, crafted with precision that suggested intelligent design. Liam's mind raced. What had he just saved? And who, or what, was its owner? The creature's intense gaze unsettled Liam, its eyes reflecting a level of intelligence he hadn't anticipated. There was something deliberate about the way it looked at him, as if it understood far more than he realized. Holding its gaze, Liam pointed toward the shadowed forest. "I'm heading that way," he said quietly. "You're welcome to follow, but I won't stay here." To his surprise, the alien leopard did nothing to stop him. Instead, it simply watched, its posture still and vigilant. As Liam turned and headed toward the cliffside where his pack lay, he half expected the creature to spring after him at any moment. But it stayed put, its glowing green eyes tracking his every step. Reaching his gear, Liam grabbed his comlink and checked for any signals from the colony. The device emitted a soft beep, confirming he was still out of range. With a frustrated sigh, he realized he was a solid 5 kilometers from the colony, and now that night had fallen, the trek back through dense forest would be treacherous. But he had no choice. The night air was frigid, and predators would soon be on the move. Throwing his pack over his shoulder, Liam turned to find the creature now sitting on its haunches, watching him with unnerving focus. "All right," he murmured, swallowing his nerves. "Let's go." To his amazement, the creature rose and walked beside him, moving with a fluidity and silence that belied its size. Its paws made barely a sound as it padded over the soft earth, following him as though it fully understood his intentions. Liam found himself glancing at it repeatedly, still uncertain what to make of this strange alliance. Their journey through the forest was slow and cautious. Roots snaked across the ground, hidden under layers of moss, while underbrush snagged at Liam's legs. Strange calls echoed through the trees, alien birds conversing in the shadows, the occasional growl of a predator on the prowl. But with the leopard at his side, most threats seemed to keep their distance. If a cry sounded too close, the creature would issue a low growl, sending nearby animals into retreat. As they walked, Liam noticed that the collar around the leopard's neck pulsed faintly, its symbols shifting in brightness as if reacting to the forest around them. Occasionally, the symbols would glow brighter, and the creature would pause, ears twitching, as if listening to something only it could perceive. It was as if the collar itself was an extension of the leopard's awareness, a guide in the alien wilderness. After nearly an hour, fatigue began to set in, Liam's limbs aching from the earlier swim. The cold air sapped what little energy he had left. He knew he'd need to find shelter soon. Collapsing from exhaustion was hardly an option when accompanied by a creature of unknown origin. But just as he was about to suggest they stop for the night, the creature halted, its ears pricking forward as a low, rumbling growl rumbled through its chest. Instinctively, Liam froze, straining to hear whatever had triggered its alarm. For a moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath, all sounds fading. Then he saw it, a faint structure, just visible through the trees. The symbols on the leopard's collar cast a glow across what appeared to be a metallic, angular shape, tangled in vines and half buried in dense foliage. It was unmistakably out of place in the wilderness. "What is that?" Liam whispered, heart racing. Without hesitation, the creature began moving toward the structure, and Liam, still reeling, followed. As they drew closer, the outline of the structure sharpened. It was clearly a building, though old and covered in moss and vines, as if it had stood here, undisturbed, for centuries. Strange symbols, similar to those on the leopard's collar, adorned its facade, their faint glow illuminating a large, circular door set firmly into the metal. Liam's pulse quickened. This was no random ruin. Whatever it was, it held a purpose, a history he could only guess at. And judging by the leopard's movements, it had led him here intentionally. As they reached the door, the creature pressed its head against the metal, and the symbols on its collar blazed to life, casting long shadows across the clearing. With a soft hiss, the door creaked open. Liam took a step back, heart hammering as the door slowly revealed what lay within. Inside, a dim, bluish light glowed softly from the walls, casting an ethereal light over an array of strange, intricate technology. But what caught Liam's gaze was a stasis pod in the center of the room. His breath hitched as he realized what was inside the pod. An alien child, no older than 5 or 6 years, lay motionless, seemingly asleep in a serene, dreamlike state. Its skin was a pale lavender, and its small chest rose and fell with each calm breath, oblivious to the world outside. In that instant, everything fell into place. This was what the creature had been protecting. Liam's mind reeled as he took in the scene before him. The stasis pod was surrounded by alien machinery, its purpose a mystery to him, though he sensed it was far more advanced than anything he'd ever encountered. The walls of the room, like the leopard's collar, were adorned with symbols that pulsed in a calming rhythm, casting soft shadows across the dim interior. The room held a quiet, almost sacred atmosphere, at odds with the turmoil in his mind. Beside him, the alien leopard issued a soft, almost reverent growl, no longer fierce but protective. It seemed to regard the child with the same intensity it had shown when guarding him at the river's edge. Liam cautiously approached the stasis pod, his gaze fixed on the child. It had delicate, almost ethereal features, its lavender skin smooth, and its form frail but peaceful. How long had this child been here? He wondered, struck by the image of its quiet slumber. The creature must have watched over it all this time. But why? And what did it mean? This was no ordinary guardian, nor was this any ordinary child. The questions flooded his mind, each more pressing than the last. Stepping closer, Liam examined the intricate symbols carved into the pod's surface. They were alien in every sense, beautifully detailed, yet somehow intentional, purposeful. He reached out, his fingers brushing the cool, smooth glass of the pod. At his touch, the symbols glowed brighter, and the hum of the machinery grew louder, filling the room. Liam pulled back in surprise, his heart racing. The leopard let out a low, wary growl, its gaze fixed intently on the pod. It was as though the creature sensed a shift, a change in the very energy of the room. Liam watched in awe as the stasis pod began to respond. The glass slowly retracted with a soft hiss, and the hum of machinery faded, leaving only the faint sounds of the forest drifting in from outside. For a long moment, there was silence. The child remained still, its lavender skin bathed in the soft blue light. And then, slowly, its eyes fluttered open. Liam held his breath as the child's gaze fixed on him, luminous and unafraid. It didn't cry or recoil. It simply studied him, as if trying to make sense of the strange being before it. The child's eyes shifted, locking onto the leopard beside him. The creature, in turn, took a careful step closer, releasing a soft, rumbling purr that seemed to soothe the child. For the first time, Liam found his voice, speaking in a soft, calm tone. "It's okay. You're safe now." The child's eyes returned to him, a flicker of curiosity breaking through the calm. Then, in a voice both melodic and unfamiliar, it spoke. The words were unintelligible to Liam, yet the tone unmistakably held a question. "Where am I?" Liam blinked, taken aback. The child could speak, though not in any language he understood. Unsure how to respond, he glanced toward the leopard, hoping for some hint, some guidance. But the creature merely held its ground, watching both of them with those piercing, intelligent eyes. Gathering himself, Liam offered a gentle nod. "I don't understand you," he murmured, wondering if somehow he could find a way to bridge this vast gap between them. Who were these beings, and why had they chosen him to find them? The child tilted its head, trying to make sense of Liam's words. Delicate fingers touched her throat, as if searching for the right way to form a response. Finally, after a hesitant pause, she spoke again, her voice halting and fractured, this time in Liam's own language. "Home, gone?" she asked, her small voice laced with uncertainty. Liam's heart twisted. He couldn't bring himself to answer honestly. For all he knew, this child could have been in stasis for centuries, maybe even millennia, her home likely lost to time or some unknown catastrophe. But he couldn't say that, not when she looked at him with such a fragile hope in her eyes. Instead, he knelt beside the stasis pod, his tone gentle. "I don't know," he admitted softly, meeting her gaze with quiet determination. "But I'll help you. I promise." The child's eyes softened, though a shadow of fear still lingered in their depths. She slowly sat up within the pod, small hands clutching its edges as if to ground herself. The leopard, her fierce guardian, moved closer, nuzzling her with a gentleness that belied its formidable strength. The child responded with a faint smile, resting a hand on the creature's sleek, shimmering fur. Watching the pair, Liam felt an ache of awe and disbelief. Their bond was unmistakable. They weren't simply companions. They were protectors of each other, bound by a purpose he was only beginning to glimpse. A soft beep from his comm link jolted him back to reality. Fumbling for the device, he was relieved to find they were within range of the colony's communication network. But the relief was fleeting, replaced by the sobering realization of what he had uncovered. Taking the child and her guardian back to the colony would raise questions he couldn't answer. The risk was too great. He didn't know how the authorities might react to finding an ancient alien child, let alone a powerful creature by her side. The child, now fully awake, looked up at him with those wide, searching eyes. She lifted a hand, placing it on her chest. "Rilka," she said softly, her voice almost musical, yet filled with childlike innocence. Liam smiled gently. "Rilka," he repeated, committing the name to memory. The child nodded, her gaze steady and unafraid, then pointed to the leopard by her side, adding a single word in reverence. "Guardian! Guardian!" Liam's eyes shifted to the leopard, which watched him with a measured intensity, an almost regal bearing in its posture. It all made sense now. This creature had protected her, kept her hidden all these years. But who had placed them here? And why? Before he could untangle the questions swirling in his mind, a faint rumble reverberated through the ground beneath them. His eyes darted around the room, pulse quickening. The machinery surrounding the stasis pod began to emit a low, insistent hum, and the symbols etched into the walls glowed brighter, flickering with a frantic urgency. Rilka's eyes widened in alarm, and Guardian rose to its feet, a low growl rumbling from deep within its chest as it sensed the shift in the air. "Something's happening," Liam muttered, slinging his pack over his shoulder. "We need to get out of here." He motioned for Rilka to follow, his voice calm but urgent. Rilka hesitated only a moment before nodding, slipping out of the pod and finding her footing on unsteady legs. Guardian immediately moved to her side, guiding her as they hurried toward the exit. The rumbling grew louder, and the lights in the room flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows. Liam chanced one last look over his shoulder, heart pounding. Was the structure collapsing? Or was it something worse? They burst out of the building just as a deafening roar shattered the quiet of the forest. Liam's gaze shot upward, and his blood ran cold. Descending from the darkened sky were several large alien ships, their sleek, angular hulls glinting ominously in the moonlight. The ships hovered above the treetops, beams of light scanning the ground below. One of them emitted a piercing, shrill sound that reverberated through the forest, a sound that could only be a warning. Rilka gasped, clutching Guardian's fur as the ships closed in. She looked up at Liam, her eyes wide with terror. "Liam, they found me." Liam's heart raced as he looked up at the alien ships, their shadows long and menacing as they loomed above the trees. The forest seemed to hold its breath, and an unnatural hum vibrated in the air, setting his nerves on edge. Who were they? And why had they arrived now, so soon after Rilka's awakening? The child still clung to Guardian, her tiny hands buried in the creature's fur as she gazed at the ships, her voice trembling. "They're here, for me." Guardian let out a low, feral growl, its green eyes flashing as it placed itself protectively between Rilka and the alien vessels, its gaze sweeping the forest as if anticipating an attack from any direction. Liam forced himself to stay calm, gripping his pack tightly. Running wasn't an option. They were too deep in the wilderness, far from any colony outpost. And the ships were clearly searching, methodically hunting for Rilka. The largest of the ships lowered closer to the treetops, its sleek metallic hull casting an eerie gleam through the foliage. A sharp, piercing noise cut through the air, and a blinding beam of light shot down from the ship's belly, sweeping over the forest floor. Liam ducked behind a tree, pulling Rilka and Guardian with him. Rilka's small body trembled as she pressed close to him, her lavender skin faintly illuminated in the moonlight. "They're called the Kavari," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her gaze remained fixed on the ships above, her tone filled with a sadness and fear that seemed too heavy for someone so young. "They took everything. My people, my parents, my home." Her words were broken but clear. "They were the ones who put me in stasis, to keep me safe until it was safe to return." Liam's heart ached as he listened. The Kavari, he'd heard whispers of them before, an ancient and elusive species, notorious for their ruthless tactics and unparalleled technology. The Kavari were legend among traders and explorers, rarely seen but universally feared. The few who spoke of them called them conquerors, destroyers of civilizations. And now they were here, hunting for Rilka. "How did they find you?" Liam asked, his voice low but urgent. Rilka's face twisted with sorrow and confusion. "I don't know. My parents said the stasis pod would keep me hidden. But now they're here." Realization hit Liam like a punch. The stasis pod, it must have emitted a signal when it reactivated, a beacon that had called the Kavari to her location. They'd been watching this planet, lying in wait for the slightest sign of her presence. And now that she was awake, they wouldn't leave until they had her. A sudden, ear-splitting crash erupted from the forest behind them. Liam spun around in time to see one of the Kavari ships descending into a nearby clearing, its sleek hull hissing as it cooled. Trees crackled and splintered, the ground scorched where the ship had landed. A chilling sense of dread settled in Liam's chest as the ship's landing ramp extended with a mechanical whine. From the shadows of the ramp emerged a squad of Kavari soldiers, each figure tall and imposing, their dark armor reflecting the pale moonlight. Their faces were hidden behind helmets with menacing red visors that glowed in the dark. They moved with precise, mechanical purpose, weapons drawn as they fanned out into the forest. "They're coming," Liam whispered, barely able to keep his voice steady. Guardian's muscles tensed, a snarl curling from deep within its throat as it positioned itself defensively in front of Rilke. Liam felt a cold sweat break across his skin, his mind racing. There was nowhere left to hide, no time to run. He had to protect Rilke and Guardian, even if it meant facing the Kavari head-on. This was it. They had no choice but to fight, or be taken. Liam's mind scrambled for a plan, but every thought felt as futile as the last. "We have to move," he muttered under his breath, his heart pounding. Beside him, Guardian bristled, its fur standing on end as it snarled, positioning itself protectively between Rilke and the advancing Kavari soldiers. The creature's glowing green eyes locked onto the approaching threat, its stance unwavering. Rilke looked up at Liam, her voice small and fraught with fear. "They won't stop, not until they have me. They'll destroy everything to get what they want." Liam clenched his fists, his gaze hardening. If the Kavari were willing to send an entire squadron for one child, then Rilke was more than she seemed, far more important than he'd realized. But there was no way he was letting her fall into their hands. They'd come too far. She had placed too much trust in him to turn back now. "We're not going to let that happen," he said, his tone resolute, scanning the surrounding trees for any possible escape route. But before he could devise a plan, a harsh, guttural voice echoed from a ship's open ramp, its tone mechanical and threatening. One of the Kavari soldiers stepped forward, raising a device to its helmet. A bright, pulsating light emitted from the device, sweeping over the forest like a scanner. "They're tracking us," Liam whispered, his pulse quickening as the light grew brighter, inching ever closer to their hiding spot. He could feel time slipping away. Any second now, they'd be discovered. But then, in the tense silence, Guardian turned to face Liam and Rilke, its glowing eyes locking onto his with an almost sentient understanding. Without warning, the creature lunged forward, gripping Rilke gently by the scruff of her collar and leaping into the dense foliage above. "Guardian, no!" Rilke's cry was muffled as the creature whisked her up into the trees, disappearing as swiftly as a shadow. For a split second, Liam stood frozen, caught off guard by the Leopard's sudden move. His instincts screamed at him to follow, but before he could take a step, the Kavari soldiers emerged from the darkness, advancing like phantoms, their glowing red eyes gleaming menacingly under the moonlight. Liam's mind raced as he backed away, his heart hammering in his chest. The lead soldier stepped forward, towering over him, its dark armor gleaming with an otherworldly sheen as the air around it seemed to crackle with restrained energy. "Where is the child?" The soldier's voice growled, heavily accented but unmistakable. Liam swallowed, his throat dry. He cast a fleeting glance toward the trees, where Guardian and Rilke had vanished, silently hoping they'd made it far enough. He quickly weighed his options, the reality dawning on him that lying could mean his life. The Kavari were known as hunters, trained trackers who would sense any deception. But telling them the truth was unthinkable. He took a steadying breath. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said evenly, keeping his voice as steady as he could manage. "I was just hiking through the forest." The soldier took a menacing step closer, its red eyes narrowing to slits. "Do not insult our intelligence, human. We know the child was awakened. The signal from the stasis pod was detected. She is the key to what we seek." Liam's mind reeled, struggling to decipher the soldier's words. The key. It was clear now that Rilke's stasis pod, and whatever she represented, was far more complex than an ordinary discovery. Her parents had hidden her away for a reason, and while she didn't seem to know why, the Kavari certainly did. He steadied his resolve, meeting the soldier's gaze with defiance. "I don't know where she is," he repeated, firmer this time. "And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you." A flicker of rage passed over the soldier's face, its red eyes flashing with a deadly intensity. Raising its weapon, it aimed directly at Liam's chest. Then you will die along with the child's secrets." Before Liam could react, a blur of movement shot out from the shadows, and Guardian crashed into the Kavari soldier with terrifying force, its powerful jaws clamping down on the soldier's armored arm. The impact sent the soldier sprawling, and Guardian's snarl tore through the night as it shredded through the Kavari's armor with lethal precision. Liam barely had a second to register the attack before Guardian lunged at a second soldier, its glowing green eyes ablaze with fury. The Kavari soldiers staggered, caught off guard, their weapons firing wildly as they scrambled to repel the attack. But Guardian was a force of nature, a shadow cutting through the night, each move honed to a deadly grace that bordered on supernatural. Without hesitating, Liam sprinted into the trees, his heart racing, each step a battle against the panic clawing at his chest. He could hear the clash of metal and the snarls of Guardian in the distance, but he forced himself not to look back. He had to reach Rilke. He found her crouched in the undergrowth, her small body trembling, her wide eyes brimming with terror as he approached. "Liam," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "they won't stop. They'll keep coming."